On the heels of the shooting this morning, there's a simmering anger, violence, hate in this country. Can the administration play a role in healing that and bringing this country together?
Well, first and foremost, our hearts go out to the people of Pittsburgh and the Tree of Life synagogue, Vaughn. What happened this morning in Pittsburgh was not just a criminal act, it was evil. And there's no tolerance in this country for violence against innocent Americans or attacks on places of worship. And the President and I are absolutely determined to do everything in our power to prevent these type of attacks from happening in the future. But that also will mean forcefully ensuring that those who conduct these acts are brought to justice. We think of the Mother Emanuel attack years ago, another attack on a place of worship. My wife and I traveled a year ago to Sutherland Springs in Texas. The American people have no tolerance for attacks against innocent people, but we also have no tolerance for assaults on our fundamental freedoms, and freedom of religion being chief among them, that millions of Americans cherish. And we're going to take steps to hold to account this individual and to send a message all across America that there will be no tolerance for any threats or acts of violence against innocent Americans or places of worship.
Can I ask, when we talk about the rhetoric sort of the last week, the last months, of the last years here, and there's the talk of unifying this country. Yet yesterday we were with you on multiple stops in which you referred to the left as the mob. At the same time, the president was at the White House and he echoed a chant to lock him up in regards to George Soros, who had a bomb sent to his home. He's a Holocaust survivor. How are those sentiments going to unify this country?
Well, look, the American people believe in the freedom of speech. And throughout the history of this country, we've always had vigorous debates. And then we settle those debates in the ballot box. We don't settle them through acts or threats of violence, like the pipe bombs that we saw sent to the Obamas, the Clintons, to CNN, and others. And we have no tolerance for the kind of anti-Semitic violence that reared its ugly head today in Pittsburgh.
But the type of rhetoric that you and the president have used, though, the president just this morning referred to a congresswoman as a wacko. He's called people low IQ. He's called people horseface, from athletes to the Prime Minister of Canada. I guess the question here is, have you ever asked him to please not use that type of language when referring to other people for the case of civil discourse in this country?
Look, everyone has their own style. And frankly, people on both sides of the aisle use strong language about our political differences, but I just don't think you can connect it to threats or acts of violence, Vaughn. And I don't think the American people connect it. The American people believe that those who are responsible are the people that actually conduct these threats.
But can't you guys, as in the White House, and completely this is separate, but as individuals in this White House, can't the way that you guys discuss other people, other people on the political side, on the left, can't you, because to a certain extent, don't you become complicit by the president continuing over the course of these last 2 years using that sort of language? And when people have not heard the vice president speak out, are you not to a certain extent complicit in that sort of language?
Look, the president and I have different styles. But President Trump connected to the American people because he spoke plainly. And he spoke the way he speaks about the issues of the day in politics. I think debate is healthy in America. I think freedom is healthy in America. And I think we need to be very careful in any way to connect the kind of violent behavior we witnessed in Pittsburgh today, the threats of violence against prominent Americans that we witnessed in the pipe bombs, what happened in Sutherland Springs, Texas, or what happened here in Las Vegas, to the political debate. We want a free and open political debate in America where everyone expresses themselves passionately and openly, but also recognize the difference between passionate debate and acts of violence and evil.
Could I ask you, the president referred to himself as a nationalist this week. What does the term globalist mean to you?
I think President Trump was carried into office in part, Vaughn, because the American people had a sense that we had not been putting America's interests first on the world stage. We hadn't been looking out first for American jobs and American workers. And carried into the White House every day since he arrived, whether it be trade deals, we renegotiated with South Korea, with Mexico, with Canada, our negotiations now with Europe, Japan, and even China. This president really believes that as President of the United States, he ought to be fighting for the interest of this nation. In fact, he said as much before the United Nations. He said, I will always put the interests of America first, and I expect you and the leaders of your countries to put the interest of your country first. And that's what he means. He's a president that fights for America first, and I think that's why he's made such a connection to people all across this country.
When it comes to immigrants, and we're looking at the caravan that is moving north here to the United States, you and your administration had suggested that there were individuals from the Middle East and potentially even terrorists, but there is no evidence that we're aware of that backs that up. Why make that statement?
Well, there is evidence to back that up. I spoke to the president of Honduras when the caravan was just forming, and he told me that it was actually organized by leftist groups in Honduras who'd received funding from Venezuela and perhaps
now, what kind of
other
terrorists
sources.
are we talking about?
But as the caravan moved north, he informed me, and we've heard from law enforcement sources in the region, that there are individuals with serious criminal records, gang members, and law enforcement in the region, Vaughn, has confirmed to our administration that there are individuals from countries in the Middle East, in Africa, and not just Central American people that are seeking a better life by trying to come north. This is. But I think, honestly, I think the first victims here are the American people and the rule of law. A nation without borders is not a nation. We have to secure our borders. We have to have enforceable laws that will protect the sovereignty of the United States.
There's also young women and young and girls that are coming here to the United States.
It's where I was going. The second victims here are vulnerable families, including children, the elderly, who are enticed by human traffickers with the loopholes in our laws to make the long and dangerous journey north, a journey on which people die, a journey on which a large number of people are physically and sexually abused en route, and not just in this caravan, but on literally every day as people are brought north by human traffickers. It's one of the reasons President Trump and I are so adamant that we need to secure our border, we need to build a wall, but we also need a Congress that will work with us to end catch and release and end the
Will your administration allow those individuals to seek asylum when they
get
get here to the U.S.? Will those individuals seeking asylum be allowed to go through the typical vetting process to come into the U.S.?
The laws of the United States will remain in effect. Now, but the President's made it clear, this mass caravan that is coming north for no other purpose than to violate our laws and to have a large number of people come into our country illegally will not be allowed to come across our border. And the President is currently evaluating steps that we can take to ensure that. And let's remember, people who are actually fleeing from persecution in the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador have the opportunity, as more than 1,000 have, to apply for asylum in Mexico. And Mexico has granted asylum to people there, that for those that are looking to come to a safe country to start a new life, they can and should do that in the first safe country. That's Mexico, not the United States.
One more question for you. I visited your hometown of Columbus, Indiana. It's a great place.
Thank you.
Also, trade is quite fundamental with China to Cummins. And I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of other industries around the country, and I've heard you speak to U.S. trading relations with China, what the country needs to do. Are the potential consequences on places like your own hometown worth this fight with China?
The United States of America today has faced more than $600 billion trade deficit. And the better part of half of that is with China. I mean, this country essentially made a bet on China back at the turn of the 21st century. We allowed them into the World Trade Organization. We believed that if we extended economic trade and exchange with China, we would see political liberties expand. We'd see China actually open up its market to our goods and services. But the reality is that now, almost 20 years on, it hasn't happened. China closes its market to many U.S. goods. It actually engages in forced technology transfers of American companies and even outright theft of intellectual property. And the reality is that President Trump has sent a message that business as usual with China is over. We've imposed $250 billion in tariffs on China. And the president has made it clear that we may more than double that unless we see China begin to open up its markets to U.S. goods, to begin to protect intellectual property, the private property of businesses in the United States of America, and also to take such steps that begin to reflect a growing embrace of liberty within China. That was always the hope of the American people, with greater economic exchange. But we've actually seen China go in the opposite direction, away from liberty and toward a more authoritarian state. President Trump has made it clear that has to change. Our economic relationship has to change, and the trajectory of this relationship has to change. We'll take a strong stand. The president will be meeting with President Xi at the G20. We'll continue that dialogue. I'll be traveling into the region for an international conference in November, but we'll continue to send a clear message to China that the days of them taking advantage of the American economy are over.
And Leslie, have you been interviewed by the special counsel's office?
I have not.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.